guess I can put that up. Just 1 second here. Okay, so I want to point out here, actually, before I switch to the answer, I want to point out, again, these are some really important fundamentals that you have to know to be able to succeed in where we go from here. So that's one of the reasons I started with this chapter. I'm spending so much time on this chapter. If you find yourself not getting confused on some of the fundamentals, this is what you need to spend time on now, because otherwise, don't jump ahead, because you're going to have a lot of trouble going ahead without understanding the basics, okay? So let's talk about some of the basics that are really important to get when you see a trial balance, okay? First of all, you want to know your trial balance balances. You can't see that from here, but if you have it in front of you, you want to know your trial balance should always balance, okay? That's fundamentally very important. Now, a trial balance should always go in order, in this order. You should write this down even if you think you know it. Assets, liabilities, equity, revenues, expenses. Okay? Assets, liabilities, equity, revenue, expenses. So you should never pull out an account from here. You should never say, oh, I think equipment might be a revenue account. If this is a proper trial balance, then you will never be pulling things from one area and putting them in another area. What did I say the accounting equation is equivalent to? Which financial statement? The balance sheet. So if this goes in order of assets, liabilities, and equity, then you know that all of these items make up your balance sheet. And these are your balance sheet accounts. But what do we know we need to incorporate into the balance sheet also? Retained earnings has to be adjusted, right, to incorporate that net income, otherwise your balance sheet won't balance. But fundamentally, you have to know assets, liabilities, equity. And if these accounts are not familiar to you, you wouldn't know that, cash or receivables or supplies is an asset. These are things you fundamentally need to know in order to be successful in the rest of this course. I'm just telling you, you got to study that if that's not comfortable for you. And I'm not saying you have to be an expert at it at this point. You have to be aware of at least some of these basics, okay? So if you're not, this is where you need to spend your time during the week. It's worth spending the time if you want to do well in the class, right? You need to understand some of these fundamentals. Now, so you have assets, liabilities, equity, revenues, and expenses. So that tells you that what's down here? What financial statement is this going to be? Income statement, right? So for the income statement, it's all of these accounts. Okay? So I would start off, you need to start off with the income statement to come up with a net income number. Now that you have net income, then you can go to what? Retained earnings. So you can roll forward your retained earnings so that you know what retained earnings number is going to go where? On your balance sheet. Get it? Okay, so here, oops, this is not the slides. So slides, let's look at the slides here. I have the solution up. Okay, so here's your income statement. All we did is take the revenues minus the expenses that were there, and we come up with $36,450. Are there any questions on where I came up with these numbers? Okay, this is just the bottom part of that trial balance. From there, now the $36,450 can go to our statement of retained earnings. We had beginning retained earnings of $3,500. Add in your net income of $36,450. Ending retained earnings is $39,950. I was very pleased to see a lot of you had these numbers. Okay? Yes? These slides are, this is a solution to the problem. It's not on Wiley Plus. Okay? So you should write this down. And we're going to take a break after this, so I can always leave these up if you want to look at them. Okay?
Professor?
Yes?
The income statement before was on a ascending sequence, not descending sequence, rather, or the expenses descending?
These are in, yes, so this, so funny, this question came up for me in the other class, right? So like the students were like, but on Wiley Plus it has to go in in numerical order, there is no rule that says that your expenses have to go in descending order. Okay, I've seen them in alphabetical order. I've seen them in descending order. I've seen them in, really you would have your operating first and then your non-operating generally, right? But there's no rule, so it's not like you always have to put the highest amount first. Okay, so just be aware of that. They may mark it wrong on Wiley Plus, unfortunately. But again, this may be part of the workaround that when I finally get to talk to somebody, that they say, well, if we put this onto your site, it will fix it or something. So for right now, just be aware that I would put things in descending order just to save yourself a headache. But know that that is not a steadfast rule in accounting.
And if this was multi-step and non-operating, would the interest expense then fall under?
Exactly, yes. So, now we have a balance sheet. So the balance sheet, very importantly, has to balance. So your assets have to equal your liabilities plus your equity. So you should have a $67,000 balance made up of this information. So the good news is if you're really excited that some of your numbers balance, that's good because you're in accounting and that's really exciting when things balance, when you know you're in the right place, right? If you don't care, you should start thinking about what you're doing, right? Because you should change your major, right? Because there's like nothing more satisfying than when it's like, yes, it worked. It's so exciting. So if you're like, whatever, I like it better when it doesn't balance, then you should become an art history major or something, or some kind of art major. Okay, so that walks us through our financial statements. The very last thing we're going to do with this chapter, which I'm going to give you a break, we're just going to do some reversing. We're going to talk about reversing entries, which we've actually already talked about at the beginning of this class, and we'll just talk about converting from cash to accrual basis very briefly. But let's take a break. Why don't you come make sure you're back by 10 after 8, and we'll finish up this chapter and go into chapters 1 and 2. Okay? All right, guys, let's get started. Oh, wait, one more second. Here we go. So, we've now gone through transactions, journal entries, posting to the ledger, right? We've gone through making a trial balance. We know that we make adjusting journal entries, and then from there we have a final trial balance. We can go ahead and make our financial statements. We made an income statement, a balance sheet, a statement of retained earnings. Okay, and so now I just want to touch on a couple of additional items to finish up this